Get ready, because Scott's is taking over daylight saving time. It's such a big event that we're calling it Day-Long Saving Time. And now it's got real savings. In fact, it's the biggest deals of the year. Audacious? Absolutely. So don't wait. Stock up early and you'll be able to save up to $20 on Scott's Triple Action and Easy Seed products today at the Home Depot and Lowe's. Offers available March 9th through 22nd at select U.S. stores, while supplies last. Selection varies by location. See store for exact offers.
With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool. Yep, even easier than that. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
Welcome to the Fantasy Throwdown Podcast, bringing you the latest from the world of sports, DFS, and gambling. With over 5 years of hot takes and millions of downloads later, I guess he's been doing something right. Now, sit back and listen to one of the sharpest minds in the game. Here's your host, Dwayne Callender.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We are here to talk about the East region for this year's March Madness pool. And I gotta say, there's one big question we have to address when it comes to the East region, and that's, what are you going to do about Duke? Because Duke won the ACC tournament. They're on a winning streak. They're Duke. Everyone loves them. Blah, blah, blah. But the issue that everyone, and I mean everyone, seems to ignore is the fact that the way Duke got their season back on track is entirely un-Duke-like. Duke, for all intents and purposes, changed their entire strategy and approach as to how they play the game. Duke, in terms of tempo, is 289th in the country. They slowed their game down to, I mean, let's be clear. The Duke plays at a pace of a Big Ten school. Duke, for all intents and purposes, while they're defensively they improved, offensively they are kind of meh. They really don't score a ton. They can shoot from beyond the arc, but realistically, the way you need to look at Duke is essentially what Wisconsin used to be over under Bo Ryan, wherein they play solid defense, they shoot beyond the arc, but they're gonna drag out those possessions and force you to either make a mistake and overcommit on defense, result in an open shot, and they will have some possessions where they don't score, but it's all to make sure that they get back on defense and in the set position. Duke is not the Duke that you're accustomed to, where they're going to put up a ton of points against you and spread you out and keep chucking threes the way they were under the last decade or so under Coach K's tenure. Coach K's gone. John Shire's coach of the team now in his first year, and he had to make a lot of changes because Duke was brutal this year to start the season, and they were in danger of being UNT, where they never got it back on track. Duke did get back on track, but they had to change a lot of things, and one of those areas was the pace of the game. They had to slow it down. So, for all intents and purposes, Duke is a Big Ten school. So, for those of you looking at Duke as a 5 seed and thinking it's a trendy pick, everyone's on Duke. The mass public is on Duke. So, I'm just going to say this. If you're playing Duke, you got to be doing something different in your other regions. I'm just going to be clear. If you're playing Duke, unless you're in a very small pool where it's under 30 people, if you're riding Duke to get to the Final Four, something else of that nature, Duke's a trendy pick in this region, and It's predominantly being driven by the public because Duke. They see the name Duke and they just pick Duke because they're seeing Duke as a 5 seed and look at the other teams and say, "Oh, Duke can beat these teams." And I'm here to say, Duke, yeah, it's possible, but more than likely, they're going to get. I think Duke's going to get handled by Tennessee because Tennessee plays almost as slow as Duke, but they're a better defensive team and they're a better offensive team. They're actually a better offense than Duke when you look at some of the statistical measures from an efficiency standpoint and scoring. Tennessee, even though, yeah, it's Tennessee, you're not really thinking of men's basketball for Tennessee. Yeah, they actually do match up extremely well against Duke. They're the 4 seed. Everyone's picking the upset of Duke beating Tennessee in the second round. You know, provided that both of these squads get out of the first round. But I'm just here to say from a game theory standpoint, Tennessee is favored by the stats and the analytics of when they're kind of running the game scenarios. You got to be very careful with how you're setting up your brackets this year if you're playing Duke. That's my precursory warning to everyone, because the other piece of it is Oral Roberts, although they are not what you would call a powerhouse, they are dangerous as a 12 seed because you've got a team that actually plays up tempo, unlike Duke. From a tempo standpoint, Oral Roberts is the top 25 team in terms of tempo, and from an offensive efficiency standpoint, they're also a top 25 team. Oral Roberts, if they get their shot dropping from beyond the arc early and kind of get Duke in a hole, we could get ourselves into an upset alert situation come halftime, because Duke is not built this year to be a team that pushes the pace and rallies from behind to come back. Duke's in that same boat as UVA, where you put them in a hole, they kind of stay in that hole. Like, it's hard for them to come back from a double-digit deficit. That's just the way it is. Because of the pace they play at, they're not used to getting outside their comfort zone and playing fast. So Duke and Virginia have the exact same flaws of what you would expect. But again, UVA is accustomed to playing that, and we'll talk about UVA when we talk about the South region. But Duke, this is pretty much a new experience for them. They are not used to playing this slow. So without much further ado, let's start breaking down the rest of this region. Obviously, you have Purdue as the overall top seed in the East. The biggest issue with Purdue is, while they have the best player in the country in Edey, Matt Painter is very suspect at times in terms of his coaching decisions. And if you watch the Big Ten title game, the fact that Purdue almost lost that to Penn State, you could track strictly back by weird coaching decisions by Matt Painter in late game situations, which, again, has been a bugaboo for this squad in years past in the tournament. I don't necessarily have confidence that Purdue is going to be able to rectify that again this year, just because even though Painter's a good coach, you know, certain coaches just do not function well in the tournament, and he just may be one of those cases. But I will say, from the draw that they're facing, a second round matchup against either Memphis or Florida Atlantic, significantly in favor of Purdue. And so then you're talking about a Sweet 16 where you got the potential of Duke or Tennessee. That's where it gets a little bit dicey. So I kind of look at it from the standpoint of Purdue should be comfortably into the Sweet 16. And then you have, as I said, the Duke question. provided they get past Oral Roberts, which I expect to happen. Tennessee, I expect to be able to handle Louisiana Lafayette. I just think Tennessee is a straight-up better team than Duke this year. I do think Tennessee gets past Duke. And in a matchup against Purdue and Tennessee, I think Tennessee has a very live shot at beating Purdue. From a theory standpoint, I think Tennessee is highly undervalued in the marketplace in terms of where the bracket selection seemed to be going. You're going to get folks playing the chalk with Purdue. And again, Edey is probably one of, if not the best player in this tournament. The big man just dominates the glass and is one of the last sides of the big man playing a dominant role on an offense in the college game, because obviously we don't get that in the NBA anymore, outside of Embiid and Joker. But I just look at this standpoint. When I look at this, and you can get a little bit different by taking Tennessee to knock off Purdue, I think in larger pools, it's a worthwhile gamble because so many people are on Duke. You leverage the spot where you have Tennessee over Duke, and then you take Tennessee to block out the rest of the Duke contingent that would have taken Duke over Purdue, because that's a popular pick too, is folks selecting Duke to beat Purdue. Again, I don't necessarily like that matchup for Duke. I think as they've improved defensively, I don't think Duke has any answers on the interior for Edey, and I think Purdue would win that matchup. Now, on the bottom half of the draw, you've got Kentucky, Kansas State, and I would say Marquette. I don't see any other team in that bottom half of the region being able to put a run into the Elite Eight outside of those three. Will there be folks picking Michigan State? Michigan State was not that solid this year. The Big Ten was pretty average at best outside of Purdue. Kentucky, while they had a solid year, Coach Cal has struggled in the tournament lately with these younger teams getting them ready. And Providence is a scrappy squad where, if you want to look at an upset that people aren't really talking about, Providence over Kentucky is very, very live as a potential upset. And again, depending on your seed for your pool format, if you get the seed points or upset points, that's where Providence could be very useful from a game theory standpoint of they are live to take that upset. And Kansas State, solid enough team, but I definitely feel comfortable with taking Kentucky over Kansas State. And I think Providence could beat Kansas State as well. So, again, depending on your format, you may be wanting to be a little bit more adventurous in some of these other regions. The East is an opportunity to do so in this bottom half because I do think Providence has a chance for an upset, and they have a live chance of getting to the Sweet 16. Now, on the bottom half of the draw, I think this is Marquette all day. Marquette, realistically, could come out of this region and it wouldn't be a surprise. From a rating standpoint, you've got essentially a top 10 team as a 2 seed. They're top 10 in offense of efficiency. They are in the top 50 in defensive efficiency. They play at a pretty good tempo, and they've already faced a pretty strong strength of schedule in the Big East. They're used to playing scrappy games. None of the teams that they're matching up against would give Marquette that much of a different look than what they've already seen this year. So from my standpoint, Marquette has, I think, better equity to make the Final Four than what you would get out of Purdue. The only question for Marquette is, realistically, can they put it all together? Because I don't necessarily see a bad matchup for Marquette. I see some complicated matchups for Purdue matching up against Tennessee or Duke, but realistically, I would still expect Purdue to prevail. On the Marquette side, I don't see any matchups for Marquette where they should struggle. I think Marquette, with their draw, should be a pretty solid shot into the Elite Eight. It's just a matter of who they face in the Elite Eight. Is it Purdue? Is it Tennessee? Is it Duke? You know, you got a couple of options, but I do think Marquette is live to beat any of those teams. And again, depending on the pool size, you could go, try to get a little bit different in one of the regions, and I would suggest targeting this East region because, again, from my estimation, Duke, while their seed could have been higher, they are most likely going to be the chalkiest play of the day. So I'm going to take a quick pause here, and we'll circle back with getting into the South region.
Don't go anywhere. The Fantasy Throwdown Podcast will be right back after our sponsors pay the bills.
Everyone loves TV Dad.
On the next TV Dad, presented by Progressive, TV Dad gets us through heartache.
Chin up, sport.
Oh, hey, TV Dad.
You know what heals all wounds?
Time?
No, it's remembering that drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds.
But Jen still doesn't want to be with me.
True. I actually saw her with your friend Brian earlier.
Wait, what?
Listen to your TV Dad. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary.
Welcome back to the show. Hope you got your popcorn ready.
All right, next up, we have the South region, and it comes down to Alabama because, you know, the story of Alabama has more to do with the off-the-field issues surrounding their freshman star, Brandon Miller, than the team itself because, you know, they dominated Texas A&M. And Texas A&M was the prohibitive number 2 team in the SEC. They were better than Kentucky. No matter what the selection committee may indicate to you by the seedings, A&M was the second best team in the SEC, and they still dominated all the SEC schools. So if for any reason this Alabama team struggles, it's going to be a bad year for the SEC because they were pretty much it was pretty much Alabama and not much else in that conference just because of how wide the margin was in terms of the dominance. So, you know, when I look at this region, I basically kind of come down to the question of, all right, how do you want to address Alabama? Are you having them go chalk through the rest of the tournament? Who is possibly knocking off this team? And that's the tricky part because realistically, you're trying to be at least a little bit different, but the fact of the matter is, I kind of look at this Alabama team as the square where you're just looking, you're essentially looking at that Alabama team until the Elite Eight. I don't really see the alternative of trying to knock off Alabama early. I think it's a bit foolhardy, to be perfectly honest, calling for an upset of Alabama before the Elite Eight. They have the overall number 1 seed. They have a comfortable draw. Realistically, the only potential threat might be a San Diego State, and I honestly think Alabama runs San Diego State off the floor if in a potential matchup. The pace at which Alabama plays at it is pretty much unmatched by anybody in the top 25 rankings. Their defense, they force turnovers. They chuck a lot of threes, but they also force turnovers. And that's the key. Because they are in the top 20 of offensive efficiency, they talk about, oh, okay, well, what if they have a bad shooting night? Yeah, it's true. They could have a bad shooting night. But the difference is that, Javion Quinterly and Jaden Bradley, they are able to move the ball around and get some decent ball movement. So, again, even on the nights when they're not shooting well, their offensive efficiency doesn't really suffer that much. That's why they're still top 5 in offensive efficiency in most categories. The biggest thing you could say with Alabama is just the fact that, are they going to get potentially distracted by more questions surrounding Brandon Miller? So far, it really hasn't seemed to impact the squad at all. Again, this is a team that, you've got an NBA talented Miller. Noah Clowney is probably going to be in the mix for a first-round pick in the draft. They rebound, and they shoot threes. It really is that simple. Like, I can't try to overcomplicate things. I don't see a team outside of maybe Arizona or Baylor knocking out Alabama this year. I'm not seeing it. Maybe they slip on a banana peel and just take an opponent too lightly. But realistically, I don't see the scenario where Alabama loses before the Elite Eight. And I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I don't see Alabama losing before the Elite Eight. I can't be any clearer than that. So who do we have that can match up against Alabama? We've got Arizona, who last year were knocked off in the Sweet 16 by Houston, and that's part of the reason why Houston's favored to win it all again. Is Houston returned most of that squad. Arizona lost the number of players to the NBA draft last year, and they still came back with another top tier squad. They've outside of UCLA, they were the top team in the Pac-12. But realistically, again, I'm going to talk about the pace, but I want teams that can score and get easy buckets. Arizona, again, top 10 in pace. Basically, the only other teams that can match up from a tempo standpoint with Alabama is Arizona. That's why I kind of look at it from the situation where even the Baylor teams of the past would have been comparable matchups, but Baylor this year isn't even a tempo-based offense. I'm literally only seeing Arizona being in the mix here to get it done against Alabama, and for the most part, I'm more inclined to, and just being honest, I'm more inclined to see where we end up in terms of some of these matchups. I think it's going to have to take a team that can slow down Alabama enough and play defense. You're probably not seeing that until Arizona, because Arizona is a solid defensive squad and they can play fast. I honestly think it's probably going to have to come down to Arizona. If Arizona can get past Baylor to be the squad that can knock off Alabama before the Final Four. I'm just not seeing the trap games that you would be concerned about with a number of teams. Now, again, you could always have a bad game. I just look at it from the standpoint of you got to be realistic in terms of how the matchups play out. And I don't see a ton of bad matchups for Alabama. I look at it from the standpoint of, Alabama, realistically, is going to be pretty much in the mix. Now, you could say, any given Sunday, but I don't see it before the Elite Eight. That's just the long and short of it. Now, the question comes down to, can, Baylor rebound enough? Because Baylor's got some wins over UCLA, Gonzaga, and Arkansas. And so, from an efficiency standpoint, Baylor's technically the second most efficient team on offense. They play at a slower pace, and they're not a great defensive squad, but they can get offensive rebounds, and that's part of their offensive efficiency, is that they crash the boards, and they can still get to the spots that they need to. I honestly think that, it comes down to, can Arizona or Baylor step up and take care of business? Now, the only question is, Arizona's the 2, Baylor's the 3. They're going to have to play each other. But, again, I don't necessarily see the scenario where in this region we get a lot of separation between some of these squads. I honestly think it comes down to this region coming down to these 3 teams. Everyone else, they're there for the participation. I don't really see the upsets coming out of this region. Of course, as I say that's probably the trigger point where all these teams start getting knocked off, but I'm not seeing it. Creighton, people might be talking up Creighton a bit as a dark horse, as a 6 seed. Creighton goes through too many offensive droughts from an efficiency standpoint for me to take them seriously. I talk, and yes, the stats for Creighton do look good, but when you actually start looking at their tempo, and again, from a lot of their strengths get boosted by the fact that the competition they played against in the Big East, but from a pure athleticism standpoint, Creighton does not match up against Arizona, Baylor, let alone Alabama. That's why I can't take it seriously. Virginia, too slow. The ACC was down this year, and Virginia just plays too slow. I can't take Virginia against Alabama. Could somehow Virginia play a perfect game and knock off Alabama? Sure. But I still think San Diego State's more likely to knock off Virginia than it is for Virginia to get to the Sweet 16 and then knock off Alabama. I think in this region, you're going to have to take your poison as to, do you just eat the chalk in Alabama, or you try to get creative and see if Arizona or Baylor can knock them off in the Elite Eight. But I don't really have another answer outside of those 2 teams. To me, this region, it should be the most set region in terms of the favorites going through, and then you can kind of pick your upsets if you want to take some stabs, depending on your pool alignment of plays you want to call for. But outside of that, not much here that I'm looking to take a gamble on. So that's all I got for my breakdown of the South. Again, not too much in terms of where I would want to be positioning myself other than taking Alabama, Arizona, or Baylor to come out of the region. But realistically, I'm more heavily centered towards Alabama and Arizona than anyone else in the bracket. So that's all I got for this breakdown. Stick around for the next couple episodes. We'll finish out the brackets and some final thoughts on the tournament as a whole. Take care, folks.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Throwdown podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and all major outlets.